In the most recent edition of the super prestige Heusden-Zolder cyclocross race, Mathieu van der Poel successfully traverses an uphill set of off-camber switchbacks and then reaches down to tighten his shoes. It could have been a normal reaction to a loosening fastener, but I personally think it was a deeper psychological reaction to a repressed memory from 4 years earlier in that same location. We're going to talk more about that moment and that uphill off-camber section at Zolder on this episode of CXs and Os. Eight years ago, a video series vaguely similar to the one you're watching now featured the Zolder uphill switchbacks in its debut episode. In that video, you can see three distinct line choices: the high line, the low line, and the hybrid low to high line. Since that time, the routing of the feature has stayed exactly the same, but the appearance of the three lines have changed over the years. But before we take a close look at that, let's take a minute or two to talk about the Circuit Zolder venue. It was built in 1963 and was a frequent host to the F1 Belgian Grand Prix for several decades. The Cyclocross World Championships were held at the venue in 1970 and won by seven-time world champ Eric de Vlaeminck. If you know your cyclocross history, you already know there was no women's winner that year, or, well, any other year until 2000. The venue didn't see any top-level cyclocross again until a World Cup in 2001 and when Worlds came back in 2002. It was a long enough time ago that SVEN still had hair. In 2003 and 2004, Zolder held cyclocross races with all the top pros, but they weren't World Cups. In fact, they weren't even held in what some might consider cyclocross season. These Zolder cross races, they took place in August. That's right, August. And not late August either, but the second weekend in August. So the next time someone complains about cyclocross starting too early where you live, just tell them you're following the lead of the Belgians and name drop Zolder. To get back on course, these early races did not include the uphill off-camber that is supposed to be the focus of this video. It wasn't until Zolder returned to the World Cup calendar in 2008 that the feature first appeared. When I decided to look at this feature for the episode, my gut told me I was going to go back in time and find that in previous editions, this feature was the Wild West with multiple line choices and a cyclocross chess match each lap. As frequently occurs in the series, however, this wasn't necessarily what I found. Unlike Namur, where there has been a constant change to the off-camber section, featured in episode 6, that has altered how it rides, the uphill off-camber can change drastically from year to year. One year there are multiple choices, and others, there's only one. This year, the feature had one line, just like it did in 2008. The lack of riders on the course before the elite races meant that no lines had been formed, and only the low line seemed like the viable choice. In fact, the only person to try the high line in 2020 was Anna Kay. She told me that her thinking on lap 1 was that if someone got caught up on the corner, the high line was a safer bet, and if she picked up even one spot, it would be worth it. It turned out Anna found the high line was running pretty slow, and she elected to ride the lower line for the rest of the race. As an aside, Anna also said she grew up watching SVEN videos, so she knew the possibilities that high line could afford and explored the opportunities others did not dare. In reviewing the future over the years to get a better idea of its evolution, I realized that the multiple line aspect is only a small part of the feature as a whole. If you look at the uphill off-camber with a wider lens, it is part of a much larger cyclocross ecosystem with a compelling story arc that can be broken down into a traditional 3-act play. In Act 1, we have the setup. The approach to the feature which lays out the journey our protagonists will take. It can include minor setbacks that foreshadow the action to come. The first act also includes an inciting incident that pulls the main characters out of their normal world, like Marianne Vos attacking and Lucinda Brand making this wicked pass to stay in contention. It's Mathieu van der Poel fighting to the front and Katie Compton taking off the proverbial gloves and letting the field know the race is on. Everyone knows what is coming, and they want to be out front and control their own destiny. The second act is the kicker. the fast, steep uphill bit that you need to hit just right or risk stalling out or losing momentum and places in the standings. The stakes are raised in the second act, and our main players may flirt with catastrophe before potentially losing it all. It's where past heroes attempt to regain the glory of years gone by. It can also include a red herring, a device used to divert attention that ultimately has no relevance, like the snow that covered Heusden-Zolder in 2010. You would think this would be the year the uphill off-camber would shine, but it turned out to be a single low line with no real consequence. Elsewhere on the track, however, things got wild, and the race is still one to remember. The third act is the climax, where the protagonists put their plan in motion, taking the risks necessary to win the day. In years when the line choices exist, it's the gamble over which line to take and how it will play out in the end. For years where there is only one line choice, it's getting to the turn first and making no mistakes. For some, this is the winning move. The race to the top and the first to reach the road could be the momentum starter that carries them to the finish. And if the line choice on the off-camber is the third act, the inevitable sprint on the other side of the grandstand is the epilogue. This uphill off-camber can put you in a position to win, but how you capitalize once you make the turn is just as important. From Marianne Vos putting it into high gear to Brand out-sprinting everyone in 2020 to get the lead and take it to the line. The sprint behind the grandstand is where winners are formed. The intent behind the grandstand sprint is to be first to the fast and sketchy downhill off-camber, a feature that should be renamed the Dutch Pass. In 2016, with his championship dreams starting to fade, Lars van der Haar made a last-ditch, final lap effort to beat Wout van Aert. Lars had won Zolder in 2013 by leading from this point on, so he knew he had to regain the lead here. And he did it in the most spectacular way, by passing the Belgian star on the downhill off-camber. It was an electrifying move that would have put van der Haar in the conversation for best winning moves in any sport. But unfortunately for Lars, Wout was able to recover, regain the lead, and ultimately win the World Championship. In 2019, we saw history repeat itself as Marianne Vos and Lucinda Brand, both understanding the importance of making it to the drop first, all out sprinted for the descent. Vos made it there first, but like her countryman before her, Lucinda Brand made a spectacular pass to overtake Vos. Unlike van der Haar, Brand was able to hold the lead and take it to the finish line for the win, and throw her name in that hat for most spectacular winning move. But let's get back to what brought us here. The uphill off-camber at Zolder is a defining feature for the course. It has been the launching pad for victories and the site of opportunities lost. The question is whether the feature loses its importance if the line choices at the top are no longer a factor. And I don't think it does. The approach and exit are such important moments to the race dynamics that the absence of the multiple lines doesn't detract from the outcome in the same way that the new middle line at Namur does. Unlike Namur, I believe that the multiple lines at Zolder will reappear in years in which there is more precipitation and more riders pre-riding the track in the days before the race. Something we did not have this year with recon rides banned by the UCI and U23 and junior races canceled. Speaking of episode 6 and the Namur off-camber, I received some feedback about that feature from last episode. It turns out that the Namur off-camber is part of a mountain bike system, and the popularity of the trail has caused a smoothing out of the feature. What I'm hearing is we may see a bit of a reroute next season that brings riders above the traditional ridges. It remains to be seen if that will mean a return of cyclocross ballet. And that's it for this episode. Let me know your thoughts on the Zolder feature, or anything else for that matter, in the comments below. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share. If you'd like even more cyclocross coverage, sign up for the CX Hairs Bulletin. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, cyclocross friends.